Penta, or most commonly known as the Handless Princess, is a rejected princess from the great company itself, Walt Disney Studios. This rejected princess was not accepted by the popular franchise and was one of the first rejected princesses from Walt Disney. This princess was mainly rejected from Disney because of the horrific original backstory of the whole fairy tale and horrific scenes of her being handless. The original story of the fairy tale goes, the king of Italy had no one to marry and was sad because no one was beautiful enough to marry him. He had thoughts about marrying his own sister, Penta, because she was so beautiful, and found her hands the most attractive about her, and proceeded to attempt to marry her. But she said no, especially because of the fact that they were siblings, and that's not very cool. She found out about her hands being most attractive to him, so she cut them off and sent her hands to the king, and this act led him to put her in a box and throw her into the ocean. She was later found by a sailing fisherman, and when the wife of the fisherman saw her, she threw her back into the ocean with nothing and still bleeding from her wrists. She washed ashore of the Green Earth King's lands, and was found by the queen's servant and taken back to the Green Earth King's castle, and she quickly became this queen servant. Soon after, the queen had died, and the king remarried with Penta. Soon thereafter, the king went sailing, and Penta had a child while he was away at sea. When the servants sent a letter telling him about the child, the old fisherman's wife got a hold of the letter, and saying that Penta gave birth to a dog instead of a child. The king approved of it, and when he sent the letter back, the fisherman's wife tampered with the letter once again, and said the king wanted to have Penta dead for having a dog instead of a child, and Penta escaped. She found a magical wizard, and she told her whole sad life story about how everything went down, and this wizard heard all of the stories from Penta, the Green Earth King, and the brother of Penta, the King of Italy. He restored the missing hands of Penta, and she strangles her brother to death, and that's how the story ends. But for the Disneyfied version of the story, it completely transforms. This story is set in 2190. Penta grew up as a very close friend to the king. When Penta and the king were children, and all throughout most of their life, they knew everything about each other and were well considered as family to everyone around them. When the king's wife died, he spent some time looking for a new wife, but could not find anyone equally beautiful. The king then decided that Penta needed to be his wife due to her attractive hands. He set out to find Penta and searched throughout all of the city, and when he found her, he was quite happy. He asked her hand in marriage, but she declined his offering, but he was very persistent with her to marry him. Penta set about trying to dissuade the king from this action because she thought he was an unattractive person. She asked him, "What about me is so attractive that you find you have to marry me?" And he answered with 2 words, "Your hands." So the king then took off her hands with a laser beam while she was in her sleep, and she woke up and realized that the king had actually taken her 2 hands from her, which were completely adapted by technology and robotic parts by a local specialist in the human body. Whenever the king took Penta's hands, he took them into his bedroom and kept them hidden in a secret compartment in the wall. The king takes her hands away from Penta and locks them in a compartment, and he then proceeds with sending her to prison where she would be held until the wedding occurs. Somehow she finds a way to escape from the guards, and she hides from them in the city streets. Penta runs to another nearby city, but not too close, called the Green Earth, where she is hired to be a servant for the queen of the city. Penta is granted plastic hands for the meantime, and the queen dies of an incurable virus, and the king of the Green Earth City ends up marrying Penta. The king goes out to space in one of his 8 spaceships to fly around and explore. Penta becomes pregnant by her royal husband and has a child. The child sends the king a message through the hologram, but a message tamperer hacks the message system and tells the king that Penta and the Green Earth King were expecting a baby, but they had a miscarriage. The king is okay and content with the miscarriage, but he then begins to grow a little upset over the incident, and he sends a message back saying everything will be okay. But the unknown hacker gets in touch with the other message from the king, and he orders his people to kill her for not being able to have his heir to the throne. She goes in disguise to a very dark and isolated place in the city. The part of the city was very sketchy, and she had to make herself look as though she were homeless with the people who were also staying there in the dark, mysterious place. Here she meets a sorcerer. Penta tells the sorcerer of the story why she has her hands missing, and tries to convince him that she has to have them back. The sorcerer finally decided after all of her efforts that she deserved to have her hands back. Penta's hands are magically restored in a matter of 2 seconds, and she couldn't be happier. Once Penta's hands are restored, she sets out to find the king and put him in prison for treating her as bad as he did and taking her hands from her. Penta reunited with her royal husband, the king of the Green Earth City, and they lived happily ever after.